Philosophers Anonymous at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. So just a quick announcement about our upcoming debates. They're going to include reproductive rights, and the tentative date for that is March 25th from 2:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. And our next two topics are going to be on embryonic stem cell research and the reconciliation of science and faith. And then other general announcements. So if any of you are interested in biology, or if you're a biology major or biology minor, Biocom meets every other Monday from 12 to 1 p.m. in DS 120.
The Biocom president, Neha, would like to say a few words.
Hi everyone, my name is Neha. I'm the president of Biology Council of Majors Biocom. So she was saying we meet every other Monday. Our general meetings are every other Monday at Bio 120 on 3 hours, 12 to 1. If any of you are interested, and I'll be there if you have any questions. Enjoy.
Thank you, Neha.
The Bioethics Debates Committee meets every Monday from 4 to 5 p.m. in the students' org space.
Yeah, so if anyone's interested in how we set up the debates, I know this one's not exactly a debate, it's more of a panel, but how we're setting up different debates or organizing different events like this. You have ideas, you have suggestions, or you want to get involved, then definitely come on to our meetings.
And we have our sister organization, which is Philanon, who meets Wednesdays from 12 to 1 p.m. in PAB 456.
So I'm Cece. I'm an officer with Philosophers Anonymous, which is what Philanon stands for. We also operate as not just a kind of open discussion club, but as the Council of Majors for philosophy majors here on campus. So if you want to do something more like this more often and participate within the debates yourself, whether it's on ethics, metaphysics, really any type of topic. I know our next panel will be an open discussion on critical social justice. If you want to just spend some time once a week and try to get your mind open and just have a nice talk, please do come.
We also have a Facebook group that you're welcome to join, and during intermission, we're going to have a laptop set out in the front where you can actually sign up and put your email address in to be added to the group. So our discussion today is going to be on brain-computer interfaces and the ethical issues that surround it, but we're going to primarily focus on social stratification. So basically, a brain-computer interface is a type of technology that involves a machine that is connected to or directly controlled by the activity of the human brain. It's typically helped for physical limitations due to disabilities. And the ethical issue we're discussing is social stratification, which could be between the wealthy class and the poor class.
All right, so our webmaster Drew put on a UMBC poll to see what members of Biocom as well as UMBC as a whole are thinking about this particular controversy. And about 45% of people thought that the BCI devices are ethical, even doing this research without any limitations is okay. About 31.4% do think it's going to be ethical, but they would want some sort of limitations on how the research is being performed. And then 8.6% said that it is unethical, and with the remainder not being sure. Today, we have 4 panelists that will be participating, talking about this issue. First, we have Dr. Tanush Mohsen, am I saying that correctly? She's an assistant professor of computer science and electrical engineering at UMBC. She received her PhD 5 years ago at the University of California, Davis. She runs the energy-efficient high-performance computing lab at UMBC, and her research areas include algorithms, architectures, signal processing, and biomedical applications. Please welcome Dr. Tanush Mohsen. Next, we also have Professor Rich Wilson, who has been teaching the philosophy for 30 years and has been a member of the UMBC faculty since 2000. Mr. Wilson has taught traditional topics in applied ethics, focusing on medical and bioethics, business ethics, and environmental ethics. He has been an ethics trainer for the Department of Justice with a focus on police and law enforcement agencies for the last 8 years. He has also developed a series of ethics courses in the UMBC philosophy department, and in particular, currently teaches ethical issues in science, engineering, and information technology. Please welcome Professor Richard Wilson. Mr. Patrick O'Neill is a PhD candidate in the Aero Lab at UNBC. Originally trained in mathematics and philosophy, he became interested in computational biology and now applies information theory and machine learning to problems in prokaryotic transcriptional regulation. Please welcome Mr. Patrick O'Neill as well. And joining us via the beam is Ms. Kavita Krishnaswamy, who was born in Tamil Nadu, India, and raised in Columbia, Maryland. She got her BS in computer science and mathematics, and then in 2001 joined UMBC's graduate program in computer science. She's a member of the Cognition, Robotics, and Learning Lab, headed by Dr. Tim Oakes, the Coral Lab. Her research goals are to provide assistance and increase independence for people with disabilities using machine learning, artificial intelligence, and robotic technologies to improve their quality of life. She investigates the use of brain-computer interfaces, speech recognition, and facial gestures to control an interface for repositioning the arms of disabled users. She's received support for her research through fellowships such as the Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation, Bridge to the Doctorate Fellowship, the National Academy of Sciences Ford Foundation Predoctoral Fellowship, and the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. Please also welcome Ms. Kavita Krishnaswamy. So we also have 3 judges here today who will be serving a more informal judging capacity today. They will be keeping time and making comments. I will now give them a chance to introduce themselves and let them tell you about their background in debates.
All right, hi guys, I am Anshul Singh, senior here at UMBC, and I've been debating since I was in high school. I did policy debate and public forum debate, and Dominic is my research partner, and he told me about the Ethical Debate Society, and when he asked me to be, I was pretty excited about it, so here I am.
Hi, my name is Michelle Su. I'm a junior majoring in biology and interdisciplinary studies. I got involved in the ethical because I was also involved in policy debate back in high school. And I just really wanted to learn more about this issue. Here I am.
And my name is Dan Sokol. I'm a biology biology major here at UMBC. I'm a junior, and I did public forum debate across the state in high school as well. And I took bioethics with Dr. Shudo here at UMBC. So that's kind of what really started my interest in. I heard about these debates and I was really interested in taking part. And I know that I'm super cool with the
So this is going to be our style for the rest of the night. It's going to be an open panel debate kind of schedule. And then we're going to start off with the opening remarks, followed by constructions, an intermission, rebuttals, audience question and answers, and then closing remarks. The judges will be keeping time every time the conversation moves. If a person speaks for longer than 3 minutes, they will be dinged so that someone else may go. So now we're going to start with the opening remarks, which is going to take around 10 minutes. For the panelists, could you please each describe how you feel about brain-computer interface, especially in the context of the earlier mentioned concern of social stratification?
Well, I'm supposed to be the protagonist who's arguing against. And what I would say is that I really think that a lot of the discussions about BCI start off from what we would call emotivism in philosophy, and that is an immediate emotional reaction to the technology. And that is also linked to what we would call ethical intuitionism, which is oftentimes something that somebody has that is just the idea that something's right or wrong. And I think what is really kind of confusing about the subject is that one has to have some kind of an understanding of the trajectory of the subject, which at one level BCI is related to rehabilitation, at another level you can have it related to restoration of function. I think what people have a tendency to do is sort of conflate those two uses of BCIs with enhancement. And I think that if you said rehabilitation, a classic example is the wheelchair. It really just does something like give back mobility. Restoration of function, you could say if somebody has an arm that has been somehow injured because of cancer and you stick a prosthetic on that, you can use a brain-computer interface to do something like restore function, although in terms of function, it's never something that you would call, and the word I'm going to say is normal in quotation marks, because you don't have the full mobility of what a hand would do, for example. So in addition to that, what you get is those two ideas being conflated with enhancement, which can relate to superhuman physical strength, which worries people, and then cognitive neuroenhancement. And I think these are the areas where there are some dangers. And the reason that one has to think about this, and the perspective from which one has to think about it, I believe, is quite simply what we call anticipatory ethics. This is a move that's been on in ethics that I embraced when it first came out about 2 to 3 years ago. And what the idea is that you start with an item like a prosthetic or a technology like BCI technology and analyze from where we are into the future and start thinking about what is going to develop. And if one said something like, with the two categories I mentioned, which are rehabilitation and restoration of function, issues have been about the stratification related to cost. I think that what's going to happen by the time this material gets to a level of high development is that the cost is going to become irrelevant. What isn't irrelevant is the idea that, and I just saw this over the weekend, that somebody was controlling a drone with a mind, with their mind, right? And when you say, well, to start with, BCIs began with somebody just moving a cursor on a computer screen, and in a sense, of course, evolved to more advanced materials. But I think what is significant is that as we are speaking tonight, the cost of everything is coming way down. As you said, there's going to be a stratification with regard to rehabilitation, restoration. I don't think that that really is much of a worry trying to think about the future, because I think in the future it's going to be a limited number of people. And when you say, what the heck are they going to do? If you said, well, it's RoboCop or something like that, I think that is where one gets into the enhancement. So if we said, well, there may be issues where we have to worry about this, and I think they really do relate to what we call, quite simply, superhuman strength, because if I have to have a prosthetic, I'm getting a big lobster claw.
Habitat? Is there?
Somebody's going to have to start.
So it's your turn.
So good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to join all of you with the dean. And I want to first of all thank the Biology Council of Majors, the Philosophers Anonymous. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I also want to thank my advisor, Dr. Kim Wood, for his support. And I want to give special thanks to Dr. Renata Tola, Dr. Tim Simon, Dr. Ravi Kubir for their encouragement, and everybody in the computer science department. And I also want to thank Rakesh and Payush for their help as well. And I also want to welcome the other team members, Mr. Richard Wilson and Patrick O'Neill. And I want to also welcome all of you in person and the viewers online, because this is a live webcast right now. So this is a great topic, and first a little bit about me. I have spinal muscular atrophy. It's a very severe physical disability. There's no cure or treatment. So for people like me, we need help. And I've used BCI, and I use BCI for my research as well. I conducted several user studies using the BCI to create an interface, creating the emotive AirPlus BCI network. And Dr. Tanush, if you could show it. So you can show the BCI itself. So you can see that I have 14 electrodes, 2 of them is for the reference and the ground. And that's the headset that I use for my research, to create a simple user interface to control an avatar to move its arm up and down. So in that process, in those two user studies, people from different classes participate. So you can see that BCI research has led to social unification instead of stratification. And that's just one example of how BCI research has been included for social unification. And you can see a variety of other solutions that BCI has been helpful to help people that have been affected by stroke, people that can't speak, they use it, and a lot of other assistive technology methods that the BCI is using. And for example, in the order that plot headset, you have a training phase, and the BCI head that is used for the training phase, you have to think of moving objects on a cube. And that is used as a training with machine learning algorithms to pick up what your brain looks like to move those movements. And that triggers a command signal that can be used to move a computer software. And you can see that's been very helpful. And the beam that I'm using, for example, this is another example of technology advancement. And with using this beam, I can go to any location remotely from the comfort of my home. So again, there's two versions in this. This industry version costs $20,000, right? But there's also a domestic version that costs $19.95. So with that particular BCI system, there's something for the industry and there's something for the domestic. So although there may be differences in accuracy and robustness, the domestic version still works and fulfills the same task that we need to accomplish. And yeah, that's the starting, and I'll explain more later.
So I guess I would like to address some of the concerns that we brought about, the use of the BCIs. So as Kavita mentioned, that we have used BCIs for a great benefit, for the assistive technologies. But as we mentioned, that there could be also some negative points like high price, stratifications of society, and also even more dangerous outcomes that could happen. So I will start with this, a couple of quick items to address this. So one is the prices, and actually we all know that we're living in the world of technologies. So any new technologies that come to the society usually start with high prices, and but then as the demands for this particular technology goes high, and the other production rate goes high. So usually the prices is go down. So that's a good example of PCs that nowadays we want to target for one PC per child in even in very poor areas of the world. So then the other question that we'd like to be addressed is about the privacy and also hacking these technologies. And again, this is something that I would like to acknowledge because I work with all these different technologies and role and work on these type of advanced technologies. So we have to admit that any of these technologies that have been invented has been for the benefit of the society, but that could be used by some group of people that can use this technologies to their basically towards malicious activities and goals. So one way is to control these BCIs is to basically use just basic security enhancement techniques that we already use for cyber physical attacks and other technologies that we're using. The other thing is that also again I want to acknowledge this, that again the technologies maybe could start at the beginning of the getting the benefits, but you can see that for government it had happened for example, an example of cell phones that you want to use cell phones to track people if there is, for example, if it's terrorist activities. And actually, that nowadays we know that most of the companies are actually already tracking the cell phone conversation. So these could be towards positive impact, and could be as on the negative side, could be as a negative sides of advanced technology. But the point is that we cannot stop growing at advancing technologies with all these great benefits that they're providing us because of a group or a small set of negative points that may happen to any of these advanced technologies.
Time.
Hi, good evening, and thanks for coming out today. I should begin by admitting that I was invited to this panel this morning, so if my remarks seem off the cuff, it's not just bravado. They really are. So I think what I want to do with this panel is defend the idea of brain-computer, rather enhancement of cognitive capabilities through the use of computers, to defend it to the hilt. Right? And in the course of the panel, we'll see what sticks and what doesn't. Perhaps there are reasons that we shouldn't pursue this line of research as far as it takes us, but I think it's incumbent upon those who would like to restrict their use to make their case fully, and hopefully we'll have a chance to hear that tonight. But the basic case in favor of fully unrestricted use of brain-computer interfaces and the pursuit of research into their applications is at root a very simple one. Right? We're not going to decide what the correct theory of ethics is tonight. Right? I think we can all agree that there's a strong presumption in favor of consent for fully capable adults. That is, if you want to do something to your body, you should be able to do it absent a very, very good reason not to. Right? If you want to pierce your body or tattoo it or stick an electrode into your skull, whoever wants to stop you from doing that should provide you with a crystal clear case why you should not be allowed to do that. Right? So consent doesn't get us all the way to morality or to the correct view of ethics, but it goes a very long way. And so it's incumbent on the other side to provide us with that very good reason why we should prevent people from doing what they want to their own bodies. Against these possible harms, there's also correlative via benefits, right? I think the benefits of therapeutic uses are very clear. It's obvious to everyone why, for example, if you suffer a spinal cord injury, why you should be allowed to pursue whatever means are available to restore function or to augment function in other ways, right? But there are also benefits of enhancement, that is, the use of interfaces that extend human cognitive capabilities beyond the normal range, right? That we are not even aware of yet because the technology isn't out there. As technologies become more penetrant in societies, more people use them, we find new uses for them that we couldn't anticipate. So there are harms that we can't possibly anticipate. We should think very carefully about what those harms could be. But against those unanticipated harms, there are also unanticipated benefits. The next point I want to make is that BCI it's the natural extension of a trajectory of human technologies, right? So we've all been modifying our bodies to these technologies. I'll talk a bit more about that later, but no one in this room actually has made it through life so far, I assume, without modifying their body in some way through the use of technologies in ways that wouldn't have been possible thousands or even tens of years ago. So stratification is going to be a big theme of this debate, and the question I want to pose, right, is not whether BCI will stratify our society or increase that stratification, right, but where it falls along a scale, right, of technologies that increase stratification in some way. There are many things actually besides BCI that have led to stratification, right, and yet we wouldn't turn them down. We think that these other technologies, whether they're material technologies or social technologies, they've been worth the costs in stratification. I hope to get a chance to explore that later. Thanks.
For the construction portion of the panel, next question is, in your opinion, what are the pros and cons of computer-brain interfaces? Is the research ethical and should there be any limitations on it?
Coming back to what I was talking about, I think that what I started with really requires what I refer to as a stakeholder approach. And I think that the research is clearly, if one starts with basic principles related to stakeholders, like for example, the virtues related to doctors in medicine, something significant, if one does something like talk about outcomes for patients or users, I think that it's pretty clear that consequentialism would support rehabilitation and restoration of function. I think these issues run into a little bit of trouble when we start talking about individuals being able to make determinations about enhancing, because I think that those individual decisions can run up against social well-being. And I think a classic example of what we need to think about is, quite simply, if everybody in here had the exact same ability to enhance at whatever level, the normal would shift. That's all, because there's already a stratification. There are differences between people in this room, and if one person, for some reason, has the ability to enhance and everybody else doesn't, I think that everybody in here knows that if Iran decided to enhance everybody, we would be forced into enhancing a bunch of people too, to stay up with their level of intelligence. And if we said, well, it's an individual choice versus a social choice, I think this raises big issues. In terms of the overall research project, when one looks at all the different stakeholders involved, including people like doctors, researchers, rehabilitative engineers, computer scientists, psychologists, ethicists, the central stakeholder has to be the user and the lived experience of the user. And that is something that is rather important. If the user is operating according to a principle like egoism, where I'm going to enhance and everybody else, because I have the right to enhance, and everybody else is disadvantaged, this has important ramifications socially. There will be people who are disadvantaged socially because somebody has the ability to enhance when others do not. And so when we look at this and say, well, we must look at all the different stakeholders, and we have to take an interdisciplinary approach to this. There have to be teams of people working on this together to think about not only the rehabilitation and the restoration to function, but also things like cognition and neuroenhancement. If we don't think about it, what we do is we open up the possibility of certain people being at a different strata, and we could introduce the stratification ourselves. And I already think there is a stratification. I think we see it on the entire planet. But if we said, well, what would we really like to do? What we'd really like to do is think about how to develop items related to, say, cognition that would advantage everyone, not just the individual. And I think one of the things that has to be thought about in this regard is what is just simply referred to as mind wars. And what we could do is end up having neurocognitive enhancement co-opted by the military. And so what we have are a series of, let's just say, research projects where what we're trying to do is actually make individuals that are on a different level in terms of, I don't know, weapons, I guess is what I'd like to say.
So I actually, to address what was the next question, so I would like to just use some slides and just in the back of the what we're just discussing about positive input. To defend how BCIs will help us to, in fact, improve our normal life, and also, particularly as an assistive device, how this goes. And this is actually an example that I'm bringing here. This is a movie that shows that there's a joint collaborative project with my collaborator and friend, Dr. Lisa Povandu at Georgia Tech. And
individuals that have severe physical disabilities in their tongue function in order to do things to go after their loss.
can you
Take advantage of the abilities of the tongue in order to enable this person to, for example, access computers, mouse cursor on the screen, or drawing a picture. The main tongue drive works. It's actually a pretty simple idea. We attach a tiny magnet on the tongue towards the tip of the tongue. As the tongue moves, we can sense the changes in the magnet. And then our headset has a wireless connection to a smartphone that is stored by the user. It can dictate where, in what direction, and at what location the tongue and this tiny magnet is. And then we will execute that command by sending a proper signal to the picture to follow by command. This was our first study both on able-bodied subjects, able-bodied volunteers, as well as people with high-level spinal cord injury. By high-level, these are individuals that are completely paralyzed from limb down. In order to see how well it works compared to a very popular assistive technology, the disabled subjects try to do the same task with the tongue drive system and with Siemens. And we look at their performance. On average, our results show that their performance with the tongue drive system were 3 times better than the Siemens. I have put it as my mission to help these individuals become more independent. It not only lowers their healthcare costs, it is beneficial to the society, it's beneficial to their family members and caregivers, but most important of all, it is beneficial to themselves because they cannot go back to how they were, but at least I can help them to be more independent and self-sufficient.
So basically, as you see, so that was just answering the whole question, so why do we need this type of technology? So one is that, just help with, individuals to have much better health care and have actually get their individual and independence back and just, live like, other able people. And actually, as my collaborator was just talking about, as at least, people like, scientists, we must do our best to enhance these technologies to give the greatest benefit to the society. Thank you.
Yes.
Kavita, just you.
So yes, there are some great points, Mr. Wilson and Patrick. One thing Mr. Wilson mentioned was that we have to work as a community. Well, what is a community? It's made up of different classes that come together. So that is an example of social unification and not stratification. So that's a great point that you mentioned. And I want to mention, when we look at the history of computing over the last 50 years, we can see there's an increasing computing power, and there's a changing relationship between computers and humans. For example, from 1960 to 1980, it was the mainframe era. Right? One huge machine and many individuals operating. Then when we go to the 1980s to 2000s, the situation changed with personal computing, where there's a single user and single computer. There's a one-to-one relationship. Right? But now when we look, each person has multiple devices, right? We have a cell phone, we have a laptop, we have a PC, we have a Mac, and if we have some skilled users, they even multitask, right? So we can operate multiple devices simultaneously. So what's the next big thing? Or it's going to be DCI, and there's going to be the Internet of Things. where we can use the PCI to control application software on the internet. So there is a wheelchair that had an arm, robotic arm, and that robotic arm was controlled with the PCI. And this could help people with severe physical disabilities have 90 minutes of independence away from their caregivers because they can perform these tasks independently. And this upcoming October 2016, there's going to be a study alpha where it's going to allow pilots with physical disabilities, para athletes, perform in sort of something like an Olympic, where they can use their BCI to control an avatar to run a race. So this gives them a unique ability to participate in something like sports. And it removes the barriers between the public, people with disabilities, and science. So it provides them more access. And that's an example. And also, Mind Solutions is a company that is making the world's smallest PCI. It's called Synapse, and it's supposed to be very small, can be worn like a Bluetooth on the ear, and its price is going to be almost just $199, about $200. And you can compare that price to an iPod, right, or an iPad, and that's, if somebody can afford an iPad, they can afford the PCI. And there's also low-cost solutions like the Open BCI, and they are trying to get more community of scientists, engineers, designers, and researchers interested in BCI research and to grow in collaboration so that we can work collaboratively in the field of science. And one other thing is, if you think about the pacemaker, right, for the health condition, it helps people that have heart problems keep their heart in rhythm, right? It extends their life, even though their bodies cannot. And if a pacemaker is ethical, then so is a BCI. That's what I have so far. Thank you.
Okay, so let's take a moment. Thank you. Let's take a moment to clarify the terms of discussion. So conventionally, BCI is divided into two arms. Right? On the one hand, we have restoration of function, right? For example, the cases we saw on the slides earlier, right? Where a brain-computer interface is used to restore some natural biological function or to replace some function. In the case of, say, a paraplegic patient who regains mobility through a powered wheelchair, right? And on the other hand, we have enhancements, right? The use of interfaces in order to provide capabilities that no normal human being has had before. So in order to focus the terms of the discussion a bit, let me just ask, is anyone actually opposed to therapeutic uses of BCI? Because I'd really like to talk to you if you're out there. Right? But I think, and don't be shy, because perhaps there are problems with it we haven't considered yet. But I think everyone's on the same page about the use of therapeutic interfaces. Is that right? Does everyone agree with that in their hearts? Okay. So what's really controversial then, right, is the use of enhancements. And perhaps you don't even think that that's a clear distinction, right? Perhaps there is no natural distinction to make between restoration of function and enhancement of function, right? And the more I think about it, the less clear that is to me, right? So for example, I noticed that about half of the people in this room make use of a technology that enhances their vision, right? And it's actually quite profound what's going on. You're using laser ground lenses, right, in order to focus electromagnetic radiation onto your retina. And you can imagine having your vision corrected to 20/20, right? But you can also imagine having your vision corrected to 2015 or et cetera, perhaps twice normal human vision, right? There's no absolute standard of what normal human vision is. Right? So the first question I'd pose, if you're queasy about enhancement, is, well, what is normal human function, and why is it bad to go beyond that? again, I think the basic case is fairly clear. I think that the burden of proof lies with those who would restrict the use of interfaces to show that there is some very compelling bad reason, right? Some bad consequence that would follow if we allow enhancement, right? And for that reason, we should stop people from doing what they want to do. And so, if there is such a bad reason, right, the next thing we have to do is to identify a practical counterplan, right? If we are uncomfortable with enhancement, what exactly do we ban? Right? We're lucky enough to have some researchers on this panel, right, who are working in some way with these interfaces or in related areas, right? And from what we've heard already, it sounds like you might have to end up banning research in pure mathematics, right? If you really want to do a good job of preventing this research from going forward, right? So what exactly do we ban if we ban enhancements, and how do we enforce such a ban, right? What are we willing to do in order to prevent people from modifying their bodies in the way that they see fit? So with that, I'd like to yield the balance of my time.
We are now going to have a 5-minute intermission. Please feel free to have some refreshments and pizza located outside of the lecture hall.
Yeah, there will also be a computer out there if you wish to give us your email address. We'll be sending out more information about our Facebook page or my MBC group, etc.
You want pizza?
Pizza, no, I wish
Just plug it in this room.
you can have a great company.
So the next thing is, as I
I think there'll be a rebuttal, so that's what we get into.
Okay.
Yeah. Or just any questions that really suit the Yeah, I think perhaps we find a position where it's changing.
Everyone knows.
Sure.
You working well, Ivy?
Yeah, so we can grab a.
Where's the good count?
It's right here. On the chair. To your right. Yeah, it's right here.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Still on my webcast?
Yeah. Later on, I can remove that part.
Okay. That's okay. It's great.
Yeah, that's true. Professor Wilson also has another idea that surrounds all of this stuff. Is we're talking about So I think we're starting to get into the crux of this question, which is the modes of adoption.
Yeah.
So you brought up the important one, which is that it's really easily be synthesized by the military. As opposed to this guy over here who seems consistent and was making a choice for himself, which that's not clear. That's the real critical one. That's the brain in the back.
I guess you could say medicine.
Like, maybe like in the 30s and 40s, like all the major scare movie research.
I don't, keep coming, Rich.
Okay, thank
How's it going? Okay.
you guys answered,
We got a cap coming on.
oh, really?
We've got something working on a few things, so it's like we're working on a lot of things. It's definitely been a pretty hot period right now, so there's stuff. It's like, oh, this is just.
Let me know if I can help.
Sure. If you want to get involved in something that's like, well, you got your work you're working on, I'm just gonna have some fun, you know?
Yeah.
Philosophical fun. You know,
The guy who wanted to
user-based design stuff is very, very important for all the stakeholders, right? And I figured I wanted to hear what you wanted to say about that, because that's pretty Okay, good. I think that there's a couple of things that really have to be focused on with regard to what everybody said. It's kind of interesting how everybody lines up, right, or doesn't. The distinction between rehabilitative and restoration to function, I am not sure that there is any such thing as restoration to function. I was reading a chapter of a book last night that said that once somebody has an injury, particularly in neurocognition, it is impossible to compare the state of their brain to what the state their brain was in before, because our knowledge of the human brain isn't that far evolved yet. And it's, you can have all kind of myths about, well, here's what you look like because we had a brain scan. That doesn't really have much to do with brain physiology. So there is technically no such thing as a restore to function, and there's technically no such thing as a return to normal. And so I differentiate between rehabilitative and then restore to function, and knowing that there is no such thing as returning to function. But I do think that in any case of those two categories, what has to happen is that you have to think about whatever you're doing, and let's call this some kind of changing of the person. There's a for what that you are aimed at. And I think that the difficulty with neuroenhancement is that the for what too often leads to trying to advantage yourself over others. And this is quite simple with things like nootropics, where somebody could say, well, in this room, if everybody is in competition for a grade and we give nootropics to everybody, all that's going to happen is that there's going to be a jump in scores, and everybody's going to fall into their normal place, whatever that is, in terms of everyone else, unless one individual enhances and everybody else doesn't, in which case they gain the advantage. Now, the problem, as I see it, with regard to doing something like cognitive neuroenhancement in terms of military, is that there is a for what that is aimed at with that kind of work. And that work is something that is geared towards doing something like defeating an enemy. And I think it's kind of important to think about that, all right? That at some stage we have to actually sit there, and we could say with John Stuart Mill on Liberty that, well, you have to have some reason to prevent a person from doing what they're doing unless they're hurting someone. If you neurocognitively enhance with drugs, what you're doing is you're hurting the curve in terms of a grade in college, for example. But if you said, what's the for what of neurocognitive enhancement with regard to military purposes, the for what is that you're perpetuating a military industrial complex that is aimed at hurting people. And when one looks around this room and one says something like, well, maybe what the danger is quite simply that nobody remembers the word peace. What we have is the idea that we're going to end up in some kind of perpetual war, and we'll neurally enhance people so that they figure out better ways to do things, right? In terms of eliminating enemies, for example, controlling thoughts. Some of this work where you say platoon leader gets to be in the field and can actually transmit thoughts to other people because of some kind of enhancement device that's been embedded. It's like, well, maybe the whole idea that what we want to do is keep this research at some kind of level where we don't actually think about how to kill other people. I think that really in terms of the burden of proof has to be upon those who are trying to use cognitive enhancement to do something like perpetuate warfare. And I think that's a very important question that needs to be addressed. The burden of proof is upon them to show that somehow this is going to be what is going to benefit not just our society, but global society. And I think it's really kind of significant. It isn't something that is just, oh, well, it's up to the individual. I mean, I think I think that I was scared because I thought of Rush Limbaugh on neurocognitive enhancement.
Committee, you want to talk? Okay.
Let me move you. Let me see if I can move your device.
All right,
Where are you?
I got it, thank you.
Okay, good. Just gotcha.
Yes, those are all great points, and I want to mention, think about coffee, think about tea. Caffeine, right? Caffeine is an enhancement. It gives us more energy, and it gives us, the liveliness, right? So when you think about natural available products already out there, there are enhancements. But technology, on the other hand, is not actually an enhancer. It extends your ability. For example, this beam, right? I'm standing 5 feet 2 inches, right? 5.2. Had I the ability, I would never have that ability before. But now I'm able to stand and talk with all of you. So this hasn't enhanced my ability. It's extended my existing ability. So again, this is a way for accessibility and not enhancement. And the existing BCI systems out there right now, they do not change the human mind in any way. You have to understand that first. And there are 2 types actually, non-invasive and invasive. Invasive BCI is where the electrode is implanted in the brain, and non-invasive is where you wear the headgear, like on your scalp, like a hat or headgear. And both of them do not cause any change to the human mind. Only the human mind is controlling those devices. So something that does not exist means something that may exist in the future is not something we can consider in this debate. That's only sci-fi or what may exist in Hollywood. So the concern of this debate, we have to look at the products already existing and what is practical. And BCI is a way for people with disabilities, seniors, and anybody that wants to use a BCI for gaming. I read there's a BCI system that can control a car. They can use the emotive epoch headset that you saw earlier. They can use it to control the acceleration, deceleration, and turning the wheel right on that. So again, these are technology that advances the human ability. And think about it when you're going on a flight for the airplane, right? We don't have wings, right? We are using technology to help us to travel from different locations. So it's not enhancing us, it's helping us to become more productive in society. And in doing that, we meet people from different classes, we collaborate, we share ideas. So again, this is a great example of social unification, because technology has allowed us to be more diverse, and people with the diversity of life, people with disabilities are part of it. And we don't feel we're patients or clients. We feel we are part of society and we want to contribute to society. And that may be my time. So I'll talk more later.
So I suppose I'd like to respond primarily to Rich's comments. And I'll try to divide them, as I understand them, into two broad classes of argument. On the first hand, we have arguments that purport to show that widespread enhancement will lead to undesirable social consequences, right? Even though people are making voluntary decisions individually, we somehow end up in this grim social hellscape where everyone is worse off than without the enhancements. And then on the other hand, we have the really high test stuff, which is that enhancements will lead to seriously bad physical outcomes like nuclear war or something comparable. So let's talk about why enhancing cognition might be a bad idea. Right? So the primary argument I think we've heard is that it doesn't do anything except shift the mean, right? So we have a zero or even negative sum competition where people are burning more resources, consuming more chemicals, and wiring more electrodes without changing their relative position at all. But how many people think that society is really a zero-sum game, right? That without caffeine or without pocket calculators or without smartphones, we would be in the same place we were, right? In the same relative order, and that's all that matters. I think that there are more things that matter besides the ranking of outcomes. I think that when everyone has the use of the technology, we are all better off than we were before, and you can see that with the internet, with glasses, with smartphones, etc. So I think that this argument would prove too much. Right? But so we have some evidence from the history of technology that suggests that when people have adopted technologies, we all become better off, right? It's not a zero-sum competition. But let's think about intelligence in particular, right? So how many people are familiar with the Flynn effect in psychometrics? Great. So what does the Flynn effect say? Or what is it? Well, so IQ scores have gone up, yeah, and it's still a question of why, right? Why that effect has held. But part of it's probably due to nutrition, right? Nutritional standards have gone way up, and a few IQ points on national test batteries are probably due to that. How many people think that we are better off as a result of enhanced nutrition increasing IQ, right? We have more B vitamins and iodine in our salt and bread, and as a result, we are somewhat quicker, somewhat better at memory than we were beforehand. Has this made our world better or worse? The other question you might ask is, well, why, if people are left behind, why is it even bad for them? Would you rather live in a society with a broad range of cognitive ability, or would you rather live in a society where everyone is uniformly impaired, right? If inequality per se is bad, there is a very simple proposal to eliminate this, which is to introduce lead into the drinking water, right? The effects of lead poisoning are probably non-linear, such that most people would be brought down to a very low level. It would completely collapse the hierarchy of cognitive ability, right? If inequality is worth is worth eradicating for its own sake, right? That should be the first thing we should be doing tomorrow. And if as a side effect, it would solve our problem of brain-computer interfaces because no one would be around to research them. Right? Let's take another example. How many people think that it's good for women to go to college? Right? Who's opposed? Okay, right. Everyone. No one's opposed to women going to college. Women going to a college increases cognitive stratification, right? Due to homogamy, right? You have high IQ men and women marrying each other, and you see a broadening of the range of cognitive capability as a result. Now we could, and this is detectable over the last 30 or 40 years since women have entered universities in large numbers, right? If we're really concerned about cognitive stratification, we should eliminate this tomorrow, right? And we can argue about this, right? But there are social technologies as well as material technologies that have the side effect of increasing cognitive stratification as a result of people doing what they most want to do, right? So the question really is if cognitive stratification is really that bad, and again, we haven't shown that that B-side would result in cognitive stratification, right? That remains to be shown. But even if it did, right, is reducing stratification worth what we would have to do in order to do it? So I don't think I've gotten to everything that was said, but I'm happy to get further into it in the Q&A. Thanks.
Okay, so again, going back to what I was advocating for, is basically advocating for technology to advance our quality of life. And you just saw this movie that, so we are using the technology. We saw the technology that is helping for improving the healthcare and individual independence for the basically enhancing their lifestyle. And now so we are going back to the next basically question that Pat was raising, and so if using this type of technologies will how actually what will be the impact on enhancing their the quality of life, or it could be in the basically again at the negative side. So I have to acknowledge that and actually admit that in the society that we live, this is how you're living in the technology driven society. That technology is growing in mostly towards the positive side, and even if we want to think about so something like a BCI is towards creating the wars. I personally think that the wars or social stratification has been existing for many decades before. So it's not something that so the use of technology has created the wars, right? So we all know that cavemen, so they were already fighting each other. So that was not something that it just technology created. But I want to again advocate for the technologies, and for example, particularly that example that you saw in the previous movie that I was collaborating with my colleague in Georgia today. So that's just the same thumb drive system that I showed in the previous slide. That we use it towards to helping individuals with severe disability to control their environments. And such as just calling phones, so just deriving the wheelchairs and doing everything that every normal capable person doing. But also from the military side, this is actually can be helpful to defend our, for example, militants and use as an act as a third arm when there is some basically times that the environment or nature will prevent you to, for example, use, for example, your arm. So you can think about having, moving your tongue through the sensors. And actually, this is a chip that is actually built inside the mouth, and this is what you're working on now to full prototype. To again control your environment. So again, we can think about this as could be as a negative side of so actually enhancing or creating more bars, but I believe that nowadays we already have enhanced technology. So this actually can be used for our militants to defend themselves to, so for example, maybe kill an enemy. So that's the whole point. But I want to actually again bring another point to to address now. We want to have advanced technology, and so how to use it. So one thing I was showing that this technology goes inside the mouse, and it's showing that it's showing as a retainer that goes inside the mouse. We built that small chip that is highlighted with yellow. So one of the key points for these type of technology is that so you have to, because you want to actually use it for a very, very long time in a very remote area. So whether for as a individual person to use it in the future, or someone who is in the basically battle fields that's very remote. So it has to be very, very low power consuming. So it has to be working on battery. It has to be very tiny. So you see that so this latest chip that we are building, so it's actually at the size of a coin. But then there are a lot of other challenges to make this one as a very tiny and obviously very, very reliable and accurate. So because there was some comments that so make sure that this type of technology work to make sure that it's working as accurate as possible, not to be hacked by enemy or maybe people who have malicious goals for this. So we have to make this very, very reliable. So we have to use very, very sophisticated algorithms to make this working. But also we have to make it very, very tiny to be usable, to be patient or basically person friendly. As you can see here, so this is already being placed in part of the person helmet, or it could be just be used as this one is actually used as a theory for the person. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to the Q&A section of the panel discussion, and this is a chance for the audience to ask any questions to any of the speakers.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure. So thanks everybody for talking today. It's been very insightful. I think the big question, at least to me, seems to be this one about what mechanisms are driving adoption. So on the one hand, you've made the assertion that this is going to be individuals making a choice for themselves. And I think you kind of danced around the point that Professor Wilson was making, that might not be the case. That these might be socially driven changes that are operating under the guise of a military-industrial complex. There's other things that could be pushing this forward. And when we're talking about these technologies in particular, especially if we kind of look a little bit forward and we start to think about really advanced BCIs that are maybe transformative, we're opening the door to a bunch of like ontological questions, right? Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. If I'm starting to develop technologies that actually change that, I'm changing the way that I define what it means to be human. And that has a whole bunch of ethical questions in and of itself, I think. So I'm curious what you in particular think about that, because your assertion from the very beginning was that these are going to be individually driven adoptions. These are going to be people, adults, consenting, making these choices. That's not necessarily the case. And if we're talking about these changes being forced by some other group, by some other power, some other influence, these are changes that affect how we define humanity. That tosses out our talk about ethics right out the window anyway. We have to change our entire framework. So, thoughts?
Sure. Could you give an example of a non-consensual adoption that you have in mind?
Sure, yeah. So we're talking about like the military. So this is some kind of technology that gets developed by the military because it makes soldiers better. these soldiers who are oftentimes recruited for any number of societal reasons that have nothing to do with their actual decision to join the army, join the military, or whatever, are going to be told, hey, you've got to use this because this puts us ahead on the global stage or whatever. And so now all of a sudden we have these soldiers who are maybe having these technological things foisted upon them for any other number of reasons which may have influenced their decision to join the military. Moreover, we have just the general population, which now has to operate underneath these militaristic influences. We have people who live in other countries that are maybe subject to what our military does to them and their cognitively enhanced abilities. And there's a lot of things that can touch, so to speak. I don't think it's as clear cut as getting a piercing or getting a tattoo.
So is your concern, let's say, like, conscription in the PRC army, or are you thinking of the U.S. military in particular?
I can see that, yeah.
Okay. Well, so sure, I'm not in favor of conscription, but I think the buck sort of stops there, right? If you're forced, if you're pressed into armed service, I think the problem is with armed service rather non-voluntary armed service rather than what in particular you might be doing. As anyone who served in the military can attest, wearing a magnet on your tongue is probably like the least of the humiliations that you endure. And plenty of stuff happens to you, right, when you sign up for that, right? So how does the use of a BCI compare to, say having to field strip M16 blindfolded?
Well, I mean,
is this a qualitative change for you?
Sorry, I don't know if this is meant to be an exchange, but
sure.
I mean, to be fair, I don't know that the magnet on the tongue necessarily describes what I'm thinking of when I talk about BCI. I mean, so this is an enhanced input device, right? So it's a joystick on the tongue. So yeah, it operates slightly differently mechanistically than an actual joystick or whatever, but we're not actually plugging into the brain. We're not bypassing motor and sensory systems, right? So it's, I don't know, if we were talking about like this intuitive ethics, like this idea of intuitive ethics, it just feels a little different when we start talking about plugging into the brain. When you start talking about bypassing human motor and sensory systems, we're talking about something else, it feels like. So I don't know if it's a fair comparison.
Well, I think that raises, your question is really important because I think that's what is happening with technology, right? Because one of the comments that Patrick made was something that, we're better off with the internet. I'm not sure that we're better off with machine guns, and I think this tradition goes back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau in 1754 on the origins of inequality, where he just basically said civilization moves forward and these developments take place, and yet we lose something. All right, so I think it's kind of interesting to think about how it is that technology has some bad effects, and part of what anticipatory ethics is geared towards is thinking about the issue that you just brought up before it happens so that it can actually be addressed in anticipation. Right, and that's really kind of significant because, like, if it is, and Patrick used the words qualitative, quantitative. If it isn't just a quantitative thing, but it's literally a qualitative shift, there are some big issues that have to be addressed about it. And I think that I'm not against enhancement. That's just what I was assigned, right? And so to look at it and say, look, here's some of the issues. We have to think about them before they come on the scene, because as soon as we see a slide, it's like, whoa. There we are, right? And it's like, this is going to do something where technology feeds on technology, and people will be doing the research to a level of, we don't even see its impact in terms of how quick technology is changing. So we have to be thinking about it while we're in the design stage. My point originally was to say, with BCIs, it must be user-focused, right? Of all the stakeholders, it must be user-focused. And that's where the anticipatory ethics has to come in. So, looking at the person you're projecting in the future, it's like, that would be the user. And say, is there something that's good about this? Is there something that's bad about it? Using the intuitive ethics, but then, of course, working on it from the perspective of some more traditional philosophical principles. Say, what are the consequences? What are the intentions? What kind of rules? A lot of things would change, perhaps.
Thanks. Thank you.
I also wanted to add to that, please. We have to remember that, the internet was first formed for the U.S. Department of Defense, right? That's evolved now for the public. Now worldwide, people are using the internet. And just use the, I mean, think about a browser. It has cookies, right? So it takes all of your privacy away. So what do we do? We usually disable the cookies. Then we have to install antivirus. Then we have firewalls, right? So even though the internet began probably in the 1960s, right? The history of firewall emerged in the 1980s. So about there's a 20-year gap, right? So just as PCIs become more and more pervasive and ubiquitous, we have to then think about privacy, because then we have to think about data transmission, and there are ways to have security and all the data. And it takes a lot of brainwaves and then turns it into action, right? So it's a way right now to get what's on your mind, turn it into action. And when we think about mobile phones, people, or password protecting them. So security is not just in the realm of BCI. It exists in all spectrums of technology, and instead of technology only, even in the home, we have to lock our doors. We can't just leave our doors open, right? So we have to think about security in all spectrums and not just BCI. And this will become important once there is at least a BCI in all homes. And eventually it's getting that, but right now we have to focus on technology advancement, technology research, so that we can make that our next target. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I have as much questions, it's just something that you guys.
Speak up, Phil.
I'm not sure if I have questions as much as topics that might be interesting to consider. So I was reading a book about disability rights activism, and I think that's probably what I'm into. So, well, I think first of all, a danger we have with this kind of stuff is that with the high cost right now, I know the cost is increasing to get access to this, but do you think it creates a wider gap between the haves and the have-nots, or the researchers, or the people that have big money, the corporations, the people that are going to get this technology first and happening? You might have that kind of mind warfare that you talk about. They're going to have a larger advantage because they have access, or better access to it. On top, and the other is kind of paralleling this. You can think of like embryonic selection. So you can bring embryos to for genetic disposition or diseases. You can select for to have or to have, and I think that's kind of parallel to this. Is that a lot of people in disability rights activism don't like that because they're saying, hey, we have a disability, but that doesn't make us any less of a person. And an example is there was a survey done of people, parents. They were asked if you had a child with Down syndrome, would you be happier or less happy on a scale of 1 to 10? And they asked parents with children with Down syndrome, or parents with children with Down syndrome. And the parents that actually had the kids were many times more happier than they were expected to be. So I think a lot of times we kind of disregard people that have nots or that are non-able-bodied. So is there something, that's a long question or topic, but is there something to say for people that wouldn't have this advantage of the BDI or the extra technology to support them? Because we have these injuries or pockets of areas, whether it's poor or other, regardless of other reasons. Do you think there's something to say for the people who would have been left out?
Do you have something to say to that?
It's according to a person's wish. We can't speak for the whole society, but for each individual, they can choose of how they want their children and how they want to form the future family. So, as a person with a disability myself, I'm very happy with my identity, and I don't feel as the patient or I got it now. Thank you.
There you go. You're almost there, sir.
So as I was saying, I'm very happy with my identity of who I am, but I just need a little bit more help. So I want to help myself become more independent through technology, and I want to help others like myself to also become independent as possible. And the main point I want to make is I want to contribute to society as much as possible with my existing ability. So that's the main focus. And I know there are a lot of medicational trial new drugs that are out in the that are not out in the market, but they're under research, and they'll take many, many years to develop because of the FDA approval. On the other hand, when I look at technology, I can become more independent faster through the advancements of technology. So even though medicine is great, and I look forward to advancement in medicine to help me become stronger. As of now, I want to focus on technology because I feel that's going to make me more independent faster through technology. So that's my view on that point. And for future parents that have a disability or are expecting, right? I know many couples with disabilities that have children, and where one parent has a disability and the other does not, and they're happy with the choices that they made, meaning they did not do any screening beforehand to see if they're going to have a disability. So again, it is based on the individual and their own choices, and that's the most important thing, more individual choices. Thank you.
I would like, go ahead.
Okay, so just wanted to answer your first question about the cost. So we initially addressed that. So yeah, the technology, usually the new technologies usually are expensive, like when the iPads came, so not any of us, actually every of us had iPads, right? So it looked luxury it was. But now, it's definitely less costly. But the older versions. But then the other thing is that so a lot of these advanced technology, assistive technologies can be, as I guess Kavita maybe mentioned earlier, that for example they have this like industry prices and individual prices. For example, the beam that she's using, she was telling me that the industry cost is 20K. The ones that if the companies want to what if for individual use, so it's only 2K. So it's comparatively so 10 times lower cost. And so then the other point that I was thinking of, if, for example, BCI technology or this type of assistive technology become very, very significantly helpful in terms of, for example, for healthcare society. So it can be, the cost can be covered by health insurance or some other methods like taking loans from either hospitals or libraries and all those things. So this is just the end that, so for example, they prove that they are super helpful. And I can actually give an example like, so breast pump, which is not actually really a BCI, but, it's actually, if you want to buy it, so it's relatively, it's expensive, but actually since, half a year ago, so that's completely free through your insurance. And so, this is something that since I used it recently, so I know that that can definitely this particular technology can be also considered as part of for example health insurance coverage.
Okay. I want to address that first part too, because one of the students that's in this semester's engineering ethics class, which is science and technology philosophy 251, his dad works at the applied physics lab, and I show a case that's got 3 different cases of literally BCIs. And the link came to me probably December 19th, and it's a man that had both of his arms burned off 40 years ago, and he's got 2 prosthetics on, right? And it's non-invasive, and when you're looking at him, you can see that he can't move them both at once. He has to move one or the other. And what I thought about as you were saying this was when Gulf War started, which has been a while now, Gulf War, right, like 1991. What I did in a business ethics class was I had everybody in the class select projects, and one of the groups picked as their project CEO for weapons companies, salaries. And everybody in here would crap their pants if they saw what it was, all right? Because so much money is made off of war and weapons that it's disgusting, right? And so what I thought about was that war is immediately capitalized on by businesses, but there ends up being something that's quite related to consequentialism and utilitarianism, and that is the guy that does not get restored to function, but he does participate in rehabilitation. His comment in this 4.5-minute film is, I'll be able to put some money into a soda machine and get a can of soda out of the machine. He does not become normal because he cannot go to the bathroom by himself, right? So there's a difference between some type of rehabilitative and then restore to function, because he's not restored to function, but he definitely has 2 prosthetic arms. And if you said, can that be made less expensive? This is why it is that all the different players involved, all the stakeholders as they call them, have to be involved in the discussion. It's unfortunate that so much is developed because of warfare. It really is. It's really sad to me. But on the other hand, when you look at it, it's what happens. We end up being able to develop things that socially advantage people and put them into a situation where, and I love the word you use, the word extension, right? Because without technology extending your lived experience, your life would be much less rich, right? That's how, I think that's a really important word, right? And I wrote it down because I think it fits in between rehabilitation and restore to function. The extension of the somebody with disabilities range, if you want to put it that way, range of lived experience.
I also wanted to add, because of the beam, I've been able to travel so much in the past 6 months. Even this weekend, I was in San Diego, California, for a hardware conference. And tomorrow I'm going to the Human Robot Interaction Conference in Portland. And tonight I'll be going to Barcelona, Spain, for the Mobile World Congress Convention. So that's all 3 different locations I want to go within a span of a week, and that's thanks to technology. And also I wanted to mention about something else about security, is about hackers, right? Even when we use the internet, well, there are going to be hackers. That's another example. We're using the internet every day, almost, and there are hackers trying the internet, trying to get our passwords, trying to get our privacy intervened, right? So just like that, BCI is the next step that we have to go towards, and that will help to only unify social classes and bring us closer together as we work towards advancing technology for the greater benefit. Because now the inequality is fading away. I have more equality in society now because I'm there with all of you from my home. Without this technology, how would I be there, right? How can I move around? How can I look at all of you, right? These are examples that I want to show you. And like that, BCI is the next step. Maybe there's a BCI that can help me drive this thing. I don't know what the future holds, right? And now I'm using my hand, but if my hand gets weaker, I could use a BCI, right? So these are things we have to consider.
I just want to add 2 brief comments. One about the divide between haves and have-nots, and the other about disability rights. So one thing that I think we should all keep in mind during this debate is that if you look at the history of technology, right, you can measure penetrance. That is, how long does it take between the invention of the technology until the time that, say, 50% of households have access to this technology, and then 90 and 99% of households. And what we find is, since we've been keeping track of this stuff, perhaps since we probably have good data since 1850, we find that the penetrance times have gotten shorter and shorter, right? So from the invention of the telegraph to the year when, say, 50% of households could make use of telegraph, that took maybe decades, right? And by the time TVs or radios were invented, right, the penetrance time dropped, and with TVs, shorter still. Telephones were adopted quite rapidly, right? And now we see probably the latest significant consumer technology, smartphones, have achieved rapid penetrance within years, right? And it's obvious. Some of the factors are obvious, right? We've gotten just much better at manufacturing things, right? The cost of these things has gone down. It requires much less of yearly income, right, to purchase these technologies, and some of them scale, right? That is, the value of a telephone is proportional to the number of other people have telephones, right? So I don't see any reason to suspect that once BCIs become widely available, that they won't become once they come to market, that they won't be adopted quickly. But let me leave it there.
Well, I think that'll do it for Q&A. So that's
One last question.
Oh, I had a quick question. You've been kind of making the argument that a lot of this is going to be consensual. People are going to enter into this, but I think there's going to be, when enhancement becomes technologically available, there's going to be a strong push towards enabling your children. Yeah, basically imposing this on your children. There's going to be people that want to do it to better their children's chances of getting into Harvard, and then there's going to be a lot of people that object to it, like the Christian Scientists object to some medicine, right? You can't say that a child, like a 3 years old child, is consenting to whatever decisions made there. So I wonder if you have any comments on that.
That's a wonderful question. Children are a genuinely difficult case, right? But let's think about the decisions that parents currently face. So on one hand, you have the Amish, right? The Amish are an interesting sort of natural experiment here. So the Amish and the various orders of plain people are people who have looked at Western civilization and said, no thanks, roughly. Or at least the last 300 years of it, they've selectively, very, very selectively, adopted technologies and used social norms to discourage the use of other technologies. And that seems fine by me. That is, I think the Amish are basically at the limits of what it's possible to really do to a child in the 21st century. That is, parents can decide for their minor children at age, say, 12, that they've had enough schooling at 8th grade and pull them out. Right? And that's a genuine tension, right? Do you allow a parent to withhold a high school education from their kids? And it seems like in the case of the Amish that it mostly works out. So that seems to me actually to be about as drastic a chain, or rather a delta between local norms and sort of broad social norms in the United States as the difference between the baseline and the use of interfaces. But it's interesting that you mention Harvard, right? Perhaps with widespread adoption of brain computer interfaces, we will reduce the need for Harvards at all, right? So what has the effect of Wikipedia been on, say, bright students who are stuck in countries without stable political institutions, let alone educational institutions? I think that's probably been much for the better. But all these arguments that we're considering now also apply to, say, a global telecommunications network, which has unforeseeable consequences, some of which are bad. Right? So the question is, if you're worried about this, right, what else are you worried about? Should we be out hacking at telecom cables with access? And some people say we should, right? But that places you in a very distinct camp, I think. Does that address your question?
I mean, yeah. I'm glad that you brought up the Amish, because there was a Supreme Court case about the Amish. They wanted to take their kids out of school, I think, at 14, because, and they had looked into this. They said the kids that didn't go to school past 14 were more likely to stay in the Amish community after their run spring. Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court said, no, you got to keep them until 16, or whatever the state law is in that particular state. And I think that's a good example. You know, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, in a world where most people are enhanced and small pockets are not, then it's kind of the same situation, but it's harder to come out of it as an adult, I guess.
Yeah, so I'll offer one last comment. I've been thinking a lot about the Amish as of late, and it occurs to me that if you want to do this sort of thing, that is, if you want to reject industrialization for the most part, not totally, and cultivate, right, a culture based around early 17th century agriculture, right? That's the sort of thing that you can really only do as an enclave within a global superpower, right? Being Amish doesn't work out so well in Afghanistan, right? So it may be the case actually that that a broad technological base actually allows for proliferation of subcultures, right? Because someone has your back, that is, you're allowed to, you can flourish and go off in weird niches that you wouldn't be able to do if you were doing like if the rest of your society is operating on the same technological base.
How to quickly add to that, social mobility is often where you can move up a class or down a class. So you can always marry into different classes or marry within your class. So social classes are always changing. It's not something that's constant in society, right here or internationally. It keeps changing. And the more diverse it becomes, the more diverse social classes become. So it's more important for us to, I guess, respect the diversity and understand and respect one another's classes, but also collaborate together and unify us at the end of the day. And that's what we have to remember, that we are one society, we composed of different classes. So it's always, social stratification already exists, may continue to exist, but we're all unified together. Thank you.
All right, I think we can move to closing remarks, and then anybody has questions, we can say for after closing remarks.
So round 1 minute max.
For the closing remarks portion, what is the takeaway message that you want our audience to know concerning BCIs?
Well, in some respects, I think I would say that enhancement in terms of the cognition is really kind of a strange situation because I do think that if one looks at something like either Brave New World of Aldous Huxley or even as far back as Plato's Republic, what you find is that there's some kind of a ruling or oligarchy, and that is a group of people who take control. I mean, I don't know who it is in Brave New World that kind of runs everything, but then if you said, well, the Guardian class runs everything in Plato's Republic, and everybody gets stuck into their specific class structure, and if you said, well, I guess in some way what I worry about is that what we're going to have are the neurocognitively enhanced that are going to run everything and tell us what to do. And I think in that world, I might actually have to say, based on an old movie, if you've never seen it, it's worth looking at, called Charlie. It's black and white, so could be trouble. But it's not enhanced. So if you said, well, what happens is Charlie somehow is this sort of just regular kind of dumb guy. And what happens is he changes and he becomes very, very smart. And at the end of the movie, what happens is he sort of regresses back to being an ordinary dumb guy. And the movie makes you think about what it means to be happy. And it's Cliff Robertson plays the lead in the movie. It tells you my age, right? But it's like, well, guess what? Maybe in a world where everybody's enhanced, I might choose to be dumb.
I want to thank all of you again for coming out today, and I really enjoyed this debate. It was a wonderful experience for me to share my story with all of you, and to also state that BCI research has helped for me to become a part of society much better. My BCI research has been published in a book and in some of the international ACM journals, and I'm very happy that I can share part of my BCI research with all of you. And again, I want to say, when we think about computing, right, Moore's law, everything becomes smaller, faster, and cheaper over time. So the same principle applies to BCI. And there's a saying, when there's a will, there's a mind, right? That mind, right, is controlling the will. And who controls our mind? Our brains, right? So BCIs of the future, and I hope DCI research continues so that it can help more people with disabilities become more and more independent and become a part of society like myself, and I can be a contributing citizen in society to advance technology. So thank you.
I want also to thank everyone for attending this, debate, and just, again, as a wrap up, and we heard about both positive and negative sides, and my personal view is that I would encourage everyone to think about the positive sides and all the great impacts that these technologies will bring to our life, and but meanwhile think about preventing ourselves from the maybe negative side impacts that they might be forced by some subset of properties of these technologies, and also some people that may be forced to use this. So in terms of enhancing the technologies, again, so as a scientist, I would like to think about, how to make these technologies more reliable and accurate, and also, as I was showing you a couple of slides, we want to make this a very smaller technology to be used in a very patient or individual friendly manner, and to become more accessible in much lower cost and be available to the society. Thank you.
So thanks again for another lovely evening with the Be Ethical debate series. Happy to get to the chance to talk to you again. What I would like to reflect on is how unrecognizable the world appears today to our ancestors. For 99% of our existence as a species, we've lived in small groups of 80 to 250 hunter-gatherers who had norms and values and ways of life of their own. And contrary to the Rousseauian vision, this world, for all its benefits, was a little bit more like Hobbes. Because you can find non-state peoples today who have murder rates that are 10 times what we have in Detroit. Right? So there were costs, there were advantages and drawbacks to this lifestyle. But whatever you make the comparison, right, the way we live today is very different. 10,000 years ago, we had a revolution in agriculture that brought us into the Neolithic, and with that came along another set of values, right? Attitudes about hierarchy, dominance, submission, right? And also vastly increased populations. 200 years ago, beginning in Northwest Europe, another strange thing happened, which was industrialization, and along with that came another shift in values, right? And we're still riding out the effects of that last transition. The world is becoming richer, more peaceful, less violent on all scales, actually, from individual murder to global scale conflicts, and also more resistant to inequality and to authority, for better or worse. And in the last 50 years, we've had perhaps the beginnings of a fourth revolution that was heralded in by cheap and ubiquitous computing power. And none of us knows exactly what that portends yet. But what we should think about tonight as we leave is how to characterize this driving history. What has made our world less violent, more peaceful, richer, and generally more amenable to the people who live in it? Right? And what can we do to continue that trend, or at least not bring it to a halt? So thank you again for your attention.
And as a gift for our panelists for participating, you will be getting a customized mug with the logo of the And once again, a big thank you to the audience and the panelists for coming out tonight for this evening.
Thank you.